Hey, Richard, we're going to go live any second now. Who do you want to do a shout out to?
Hey there, Michael. I wanted to give a shout out to my friend Pradesh. He's a really good guy, and he's been there for me through some tough stuff the last couple of years. Nothing but
I
love
love
for him.
that for Dash. Here we go. Roll number. Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking to Richard Braxton today. He travels all over the world because apparently he has nothing better to do, and he just makes a living out of it and makes it fun. He's actually doing it while he's waiting for his next job to happen. So, Richard, welcome to the show. I am extremely excited to ask you about living outside of the U.S., traveling, and how you got over your comfort zone of being in one place and now just traveling wherever you feel like and being comfortable there. So,
Yeah,
welcome.
thank you, Michael. Yeah, always happy to talk about this stuff.
Hey, so just so people know that you have traveled and not just like from, Oklahoma to Texas, where are some of the places that you have actually traveled to?
Oh man, had a couple trips down to South America. Did a 100-mile hiking trip to Patagonia down at the tip of the continent. Been to Peru 3 times. Had some really good trips over to Taiwan, Korea, and Japan. Lived in Norway for 2 winters. Met a guy online. He invited me to live with his family. Loved it so much I did it twice. And just came back about 2 months ago from a trip to the Balkans. So Bosnia, Kosovo, Albania, Montenegro, just that whole general region.
So, here's what I want to focus on. You've gone places that people like Patagonia. Everyone's like, "Yeah, I got a Patagonia jacket" or something like that. But you've been to places where people go like, "Aren't there wars going on there? And aren't people like shooting people and these sorts of things, right?" So we're going to get to that. But how did you, first of all, how did you just get into, you said, "I want to go someplace." What did you do to get out of that mindset of being in America and saying, "Let's go somewhere else"?
Yeah, it's tricky because, our country is so big. And if you want to see like a dramatically different culture, then you could just go to like Maine or Louisiana or Chicago or Los Angeles or Alaska. Like all these places are wildly different. But it wasn't until Norway, honestly, that I got to see a place that was like really fundamentally different on a lot of levels. And I thought the world just worked a certain way anywhere you went, and I went there, and it sure as hell didn't. And it just got me
Okay.
curious about other places and what's life like over there.
Well, I know nothing about Norway, but I probably should. So why was it different? What happened?
Oh man, the car to pedestrian interactions outside the US is just like a great place to start. But it's just like very pedestrian friendly. You can walk so many places. Public transit is fantastic, which is the case for most of Europe. Norway culturally is like very proud of what they have. Like they have a really good habit of saying like, "Oh, of course this works this way. It's Norway. Like, of course it's perfect. Everything here is supposed to be perfect. Our government cares about us." It's like I got to have whale in this little city called Stavanger. It's like their third biggest city, but it's very far out in the middle of nowhere. Got to stay with a family out there for a couple of days, and they're talking about they celebrate Christmas on different days over in Norway for
Hmm.
cultural reasons. So I technically got to have 3 Christmases that winter. Just like a lot of very odd, strange stuff. They're all super friendly and just like very open-minded people in a way that you can't really find stateside.
I would say, listening to most of the people I know that have traveled, the thing that gets me thinking is everyone says that they've gone places and everybody's friendly and welcoming. Is that what you've pretty much found or no?
Generally, people are. I think you could even say that about the US. I've got a good friend who he and his wife just moved from Seoul in South Korea to the United States. And they're like, "Oh, Americans are so friendly. Like everyone is so nice. Everyone wants to help out." And it's like, I don't know, Jiwan. I think that's just because you guys aren't from here. Like Americans aren't very friendly to each other. But you meet someone and it's like, oh, they flew literally halfway across the world to live in the US. And it's like, oh, that's awesome. Like you want to help those people out. So I think in foreign countries there's a lot of that too. Like people appreciate. You only have so much free time, while you're alive, and you dedicate a significant amount of it to seeing like what life is like for them. And that's a pretty big compliment, even if you don't say anything about the place at all.
So when you got the invitation to go to Norway, and I assume you got this, were you chatting or emailing or what were you doing so that this became you know what, I don't know these people, I never met them in person, never shook their hands, but I'm going to go stay with them in Norway. How did that happen?
Oh, dude, it was a doozy. I met this guy on Reddit. I was doing professional photography at the time and posting a lot to the photography like forum section of Reddit. And this guy, like, I sent him a compliment, like, hey, I see your photos, they're really good. Just keep it up. Just sending some positive energy his way. He wanted to like keep on talking after that. And I was like, oh no, I wasn't intending for all of this interaction. And we chatted for a couple of weeks. He stalked through my comment history, found my Facebook profile, and sent me a friend request. And he ended up being this, I think he was in his late 30s at the time, but he was a high school physics teacher in Bergen, Norway, like the cultural capital of the country, their second biggest city. And we just kept on talking. And he mentioned his family inherited this apartment building. His parents live on the top floor. His uncle lives below them. And then he and his girlfriend, now wife, live on the ground floor. And they're like, yeah, it's an uncommon problem in Norway, but our apartment is too big. We have a spare bedroom and we always have friends from Japan, Vancouver, Toronto, Santiago, London visiting. And I had never left the US. So I was like, oh, if you had a friend from Texas, in the area, how would you feel about that? And he's like, oh, you want to visit Norway? How long do you want to stay? And I said, well, winter break for my university is about a month long. And he was like, awesome, you can stay with us for a month. And that was
Really?
that was that. That was it.
So you literally took up from school when you had your winter break, went to Norway and stayed there for a month for a guy that you've met through Reddit.
Yes.
Okay. What did you do for the month while you were there?
Oh man, just vibing. Um, it was, oh man, I did a lot of the touristy stuff. Did some hiking around there, not too much. Checked out some of the islands on the coast throughout the fjords, like north of Bergen. At the time, I was playing the pipe organ, which is a whole nother story. But the guy I connected with, Øystein, he wanted me to like meet some other Norwegians with some similar interests. So he went on this thing called the Underskog. It's a forum only for Norwegian nationals. And he was like, hey, I have this American visiting. He plays the pipe organ. Are there any young people who also have this weird shared interest? And this guy in a little town called Klepp hit him up. I think Klepp has like 4,000 people living in it, way out there. And he was like, yeah, I'd absolutely love to show this guy around. My friend hit the dude back up and never got a response from him. And I figured, well, that's that. It's whatever. I'm in Bergen. It's still good. It's fine. And we were sitting around watching Breaking Bad, and my friend's phone starts ringing. And apparently on the Underskog, you just have your cell phone number like on your profile. And this guy in Klepp called him back. And the phone call basically started with, hello, is there an American in your house right now? He was like, I'm sorry for not responding to the email. I've been so busy. If you would like to come visit, my family would love to host him. We're free on these days. So I got to spend some time in small town Norway as well, which was,
Uh-huh.
oh man, a doozy. That's like truly the stuff you don't see as a tourist.
So if this was your very first trip, what kind of hesitation did you have? Any or how did you make plans for it? How did you know that, X, Y, and Z was going to happen or not happen? How did you get going on your very first one?
It was a pretty big jump out of the comfort zone, honestly. I mean, Norway is like a super easy travel destination. Like it's incredibly safe. They speak English. It's fine. It's whatever. But I just hadn't done anything like that before. I think the cost was probably the most prohibitive thing for me. As a poor college student, I had to drop about $900 on the flight. And like once you get over there, food is so expensive and the food portions are so small. It's like you go in a place and you pay $30 and you still leave hungry. It's a bit trying. But
Okay.
oddly enough, you'd get a kick out of this. My parents were against the idea, like broadly, just who do you know in Norway? What are you going to do over there? There aren't even any black people over there, which,
Right?
fair. That's true. But my father especially was very much against it, and we had this phone call where he essentially told me like, "You are not going to Norway." It's like, what do you mean? Like I'm paying for the trip myself. Like, what's the deal? Like, how
No.
can I not go to Norway?
Okay.
And he was just adamant, just like, no, you absolutely are not going there, full stop. And then he died about 4 days later. And that was the last conversation we had.
Oh,
So
wow.
I don't think he'd be too appreciative of the direction I've gone since then. But yeah, there
What
was a
what
lot
was
of
his fear
apprehension.
though? Why did he not want you to go? Because I think this gets to the heart of why a lot of Americans especially don't travel. What do you think it was?
I couldn't even tell you. It might have just been like a lack of knowledge about the place or like fear of the unknown and all that. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's arguably the safest place I've traveled to. Like even within Europe, Norway is mind-bogglingly safe. Like there are zero concerns. So I couldn't tell you.
Okay. So out of you started with Norway, safest place
Hmm.
ever. You also mentioned that you've been to the Balkans.
Hmm.
Um, uh, what's the contrast there as far as safe and interesting and getting there and that sort of thing?
It's it's very safe over there with a very big asterisk.
Hmm.
I didn't have a single concern over there. It's just people living their lives for the most part. Um, on the flip side, you go to Bosnia, and I think this might be a generational thing because like people my age are just like Bosnia, cool, never heard of it. And anyone that's like 5 years older than me is just like, are you sure about this?
Right, right.
But even there, it's just like incredibly safe, zero concerns at all. But there isn't a single building in the country for the most part that isn't covered in bullet holes, mortar strikes, grenade shrapnel, just all of that. Once you get past the fact that every single building is missing like giant significant chunks and there's still a lot of tension post-war, it really is a great place to be. Just like so much history that is related to the war for the most part, so much culture that is related to the war for the most part. But from a safety standpoint, like, no, it's fine. I honestly felt like more at risk of danger stopping in New York City on the way back to Portland after the trip.
That I believe, because I've been through. So even in a war-torn country, you felt safe there just traveling. And I have to ask you this because it's something that weighs on my mind. As a Black American traveling, how do you find being Black outside of America affects or doesn't affect your travel um, adventures, interactions, that sort of thing?
Bro, it is a blessing and a half. There's a lot you can say about the Black experience, about the whole, essentially not knowing where your family is from.
Yeah.
You don't really have a culture to an extent the way that most of the globe does. And then you have the entire like surviving in your own home country aspect as well. But outside the US, it is like it's fun. It really is. And it truly is something that not a lot of people get to experience. In Peru, people would always be like, "Oh, are you from France?" And I was like, "Oh, from France? Me? Could you imagine? Oh my God." You travel to places off the beaten path, and it's just like you're not a person that people see very often. So usually it's just a lot of curiosity. Um, like especially over in Asia, like you get a lot of different reactions depending on what country you go to. I stopped in
Mhm.
Okinawa when I was in Japan, and Okinawa is still like a third US military base at this point. The locals are not very happy about it.
Right.
And there's definitely a very like anti-American, anti-military vibe on the island. You go to bars and They look at you, they see your skin color, and the first question is, "Are you with the military?" It's like, "No." It's like, "Okay,
Uh-huh.
you're good. You can come in. You're fine." Go to
Wow.
Taiwan and people are just staring at you absolutely nonstop. And in Kosovo, it was just like they were happy to see me because they don't get a lot of tourism at all. And to think like not only an American is taking their time to visit this place in their personal time, like not with an NGO or anything, but just like a Black American on top of that,
Uh-huh.
it's like we never see them off base. And this person isn't even here to go to a base. It's just like they think it's really cool. And even for people that don't think it's cool, I always say it's like if you were living in Dallas and you ran into someone and they were like, "Oh yeah, I'm visiting from like Myanmar or something."
Yeah.
Your reaction, it isn't positive, it isn't negative. It's just like, "Wow, that's crazy. This person came all the way here. Very cool. Have a good trip." And that's just like the baseline reaction everywhere you go.
Okay. That actually eases a lot of questions in my mind, I suppose that's the way to put it. I'm gonna travel with you one of these days. Hit you up, and we're gonna go somewhere. I'm not sure where it's gonna be yet, but we're gonna go somewhere. So,
There's a
when
long list,
you
man.
do you ever worry about languages, having to figure out like how to talk in the different places?
Yeah, it's tricky. I'm not good with languages. It's my biggest blind spot. I'm horrible with them. But I always try to learn like some basics before going somewhere. So,
Okay.
like a bit of Spanish. I went to Slovenia 2 years ago and tried to learn a bit of Slovenian. Would not recommend that experience. Got to learn
What
like,
happened?
God, there are a couple of like weird languages out there that you just are better off not touching. And it turns out Slovenian's one of them. Because you know how
Uh-huh.
there are like Romance languages, Germanic languages. Slovenian is, I think, the only language spoken that is Germanic, Romantic, and Slavic all at the
Wow.
same time. So it's just like it's bad. It's real bad. That's a rough one.
Okay. So
But
you gotta grow up there if you're gonna speak it.
yeah, it's
Interesting.
trying. But sometimes it kind of bites you though, because especially like with Europe and areas where these countries are really small and tiny. Like for the Slovenia trip, I was passing through a couple of places because I did like Slovenia, Austria, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. And there it's like, I'm sorry, there's too many languages. Like most of these places are pretty touristy. Just, I don't like it, but maybe I'll just have to be the American that only speaks English for this trip. And for
Uh-huh.
the Balkans, I took the same approach because you go online and they're like, it's chaos for languages. You have Slovenian, you have Croatian, you have Serbo-Croat, you have Macedonian, you have Albanian, you have Bosnian, you have Romanian, and it's like I give up before this even starts.
Well,
And
how
then
do
I
they
got over
handle with
there,
it with all those languages?
dude. I got over there, and half of them were just the exact same language, and they were just like after the war, all these countries wanted to seem like they were different than their neighbors. But they're like, if you only speak Bosnian, you can go up to a Croatian and just speak your native language to each other, and like it'll work just fine. So it's I
Wow.
felt kind of bad. Like I could have learned some stuff before going over there, but I didn't because yeah.
Yeah. What are the basic words that you try and learn when you go someplace new? Words,
Hello,
phrases.
thank you. Those are like the two biggest ones. Hello, thank you, and asking for an English menu, or if someone speaks English, those will take you pretty far.
Okay. I can see that. Because if you're from Bosnia and come here and ask for something and anything but English, you're just getting English menu. Yeah, here it is. I'll
It's the
translate
default language
hamburger
in
to
a lot of
hamburger.
places. It's a really big
Is it?
advantage
Okay.
for us.
So when you travel to these places, I have to assume that you travel by air because you can't get there by boat fast enough. So what's your experience with the air travel?
It's not always by air. It depends on the place. Like the Balkans are really bus heavy. South America is really bus heavy too, but there are definitely more plane options because they have tourism over there, which is something the Balkans haven't snagged just yet. Yeah, the plane experience is usually pretty normal for the most part. Um, The budget airlines are always interesting. Sometimes you've got to do some research. Like Cusco, Peru is a classic example because there are no direct flights to Cusco. You always have to fly into Lima and then book with a smaller airline, Lima to Cusco. And everyone, they go to Google Flights and they see like, oh, Lima to Cusco for $20. That's perfect. I'll take it. But
Mhm.
what they don't realize is it's a small Peruvian airline that's running prop planes, and you have like a maximum limit for your luggage because the plane physically can't carry any more. And with like the smallest cloud, they have to cancel the flight. So if you book a flight at 6 p.m., it's going to get delayed by like 5 hours because you've got the folks in front of you that are still waiting. Or like the Asian budget airlines are just a whole nother experience. Um, really good service. There's like a bajillion of them. They've got the weirdest names. I had this flight to South Korea with like Peach Airlines. It's like I don't know what's going on over here, but they're cheap. They're good. They have really nice service. And Ryanair is the worst by far. Just like
Where is Ryanair from?
it's a European based airline. And imagine if like Spirit and Frontier had a baby and the
No.
baby had like really big life aspirations. I know a couple of years ago, the Ryanair CEO was looking into if it would be legal to sell standing seats for a
Mm,
flight. Just like,
no.
can we take the seats out and just shove some more people in there? They're bad.
Wow.
Like yeah, I won't even go into it. If you have friends that spend a lot of time in Europe, they probably have Ryanair stories, and they are true.
Okay. Okay. So if you're gonna tell somebody goes like, you know what, I want to travel, I want to get outside the US and see something different. What's a first trip that you would say, you know what, if you want something easy, where do you say go? Norway, somewhere if you want to go South America, where would you go?
Oh man, I never hear people talk about it, but I'd probably say Vienna. Vienna is just like Vienna is heaven for tourists. I don't know how they did it over there, but that city is just pristine perfection. You know,
Uh-huh.
Vienna's fantastic. Um, because you have like I was talking with a friend about this last night. I don't like saying second world countries, but like a majority of countries on earth are significantly more unhinged than like the United States and most Western European countries. You know, I say Vienna because it's pretty familiar. Um, Not everyone there speaks English. Like even the young people, a good chunk of them only speak Viennese German. So you get to experience, being lost in a place where you can't communicate with people. But it's
Right.
generally like low risk, South America and spots like that. You get the same. Yeah, it's a lot cheaper, but it's also a lot more challenging in a mental way. Like sometimes your only food option is going to be guinea pig. Sometimes you book a taxi and you pick up an old man in the middle of nowhere, and the two of you have to share the passenger seat in the front of the car. Sometimes you just end up stuck in a small town for a day or two, and there's just not much you can do about it. That's typically not going to happen in Vienna, but it sounds silly, but those are the kind of things that really can like knock you off your ball, like get you off your A game and really get you thinking like maybe I should just reschedule my flight. Maybe I should just head home a couple of days early. Like sometimes travel isn't terribly fun, but your definition of fun changes the more you do it.
What are some things that you have like changed your worldview of because you've traveled outside the US and now you're actually going like, you know what? We're seeing it differently than other people, or most of the world's seeing it different than us. What are some of those things that you've experienced?
Oh man. It sounds silly and stupid, but the car thing is always what comes back to me. I
Hmm.
hate Americans with cars. I think it's going to be the thing that pushes me to like living outside this country full time in a couple of years. Just like general consideration, pedestrian friendliness, and just having like sociable spaces. Like that's something I really wish we had more of over here. And for just like general worldview stuff, I don't know. It just chills you out a lot. Um, my first time to Peru, which I think was my first time to South America too. I've got a Peruvian friend. He invited me to visit his family down there for a couple of weeks. And I'd known this guy for 3, 4 years or so in Dallas, just like great, stable, kind of boring, big American city, you know. And I get to Cusco, and it's like all the buildings are from, the 1300s. They generally have not like rebuilt them. And props to the Inca for, their buildings holding up for, coming up on 1,000 years pretty soon. But all the buildings are ancient for the most part. I go to his family home, and there's like this stream of water. I don't want to say river because it's not too big, but there's this like
Wow.
perpetual stream of water just running through the main hallway in his house with like a nonstop line of like ants and bugs and insects just coming along with it too. Not insulated at all. It gets extremely cold there at night. People just like sleep in their coats when they go to bed because it gets below freezing even during the summertime. And that's life. That's just the default. You come from the US and you think these are horrible conditions, like I'm freezing, there are bugs everywhere, and it's just like it is what it is. What are you going to do? Everyone's living life like this. You're sitting over in the corner complaining, and everyone over here is trying to think of like a good place to get lunch in the afternoon. We
That is,
really don't have life very bad at all. And things like that, just like being down there, it isn't a Peruvian thing per se. It's really just like a global thing. A lot of the world does not live in the conditions that places like the US, Norway, Spain, whatever have. So seeing those places, it really teaches you that just like this isn't some cool experience where you get back home and you're like, it's so cold. We have to sleep in our coats every single night. They can't afford refrigerators. They just leave raw meat sitting on the countertop because it just stays cold, when the sun goes down. It's like really a lot of people have that experience. It isn't so much that they're the outliers, like we ourselves are the outliers in a lot of these situations.
having been there now, is it someplace that you would want to, do you want to experience more of that, or is the American experience good? Do you want to help bring up the people who don't have, refrigerators, or how do you see it now?
Hmm. It's weird because you talk to them, and generally, like in a lot of these places, people are fine. Like people are not sitting around going, I wish we could have the standard of living they had, in the big Western countries. It's just like life. They're okay with it. Um, I liked it a lot, honestly. It There's a lot to say for just like a place that's ever so slightly unhinged. You want to go from point A to point B, and you can just like flag down a car. It might not even be a taxi. It might just be someone like going to buy groceries. They're like, yeah, I'll take you for a couple of dollars. That's fine. That's no problem at all. It's okay. It's just like kind of relaxing in a way. You never really have to worry about just like, am I breaking these rules? Like, is this going to be fine? Am I going to get hit with like a late fee or anything like that? It's like, no, just it's chill. If you're looking for a place to stay, you don't even need to look for a hotel, especially like small town Peru and a lot of South America as well. You can just go to like a store and ask like, hey, you know, can I just like sleep here or sleep, in your living room for the night instead? I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. Like, does this much sound fine? It's a okay, super chill.
And have you done that yourself?
Once, my friend took me to this religious festival in the mountains up in Peru. And that's like an entire story in and of itself. But it's in this town with a population of like 2,000 people, and it
Yeah.
gets swarmed by tens of thousands of people once a year. Like 99% of them are Peruvians. It is not a foreigner friendly place at all. But just because of the lack of housing, my friend was like, don't worry, I got a connection there. I know a guy. We have a place to sleep tonight. I'm like, dope, awesome. And we get to this town, and it is literally like a building they abandoned construction on. It's just like a gigantic open concrete floor up this rickety staircase. And there were like two beds. And he was like, okay, my mom gets one bed, and my grandma gets the other bed, and the rest of us have the floor. And that was just like That was it. I think we paid like $4 a person for the honor of sleeping on that concrete floor. But,
Wow.
it did the job. I had no complaints.
All right. So what do you want to say to people that they're listening to you? I'm listening to you. Everyone wants to start traveling. What do you want to just say to them in general about um, getting out there and trying the experience?
And just go for it. It's even if you have a bad time, you're still going to come away with a lot of good stories. That's for sure. You know, there's a perspective that a lot of my older outdoorsy friends have where a lot of people, and this is related to traveling, a lot of people for like hiking, climbing, things like that, they'll go online and ask people like, "Hey, I saw you just went there. Like, how was the weather? How are the conditions? What's the trail like?" And a lot of my older friends get kind of angry when they see stuff like that. They're like, "Just go do it." You know, worst
Okay.
case scenario, you left the house. I guarantee you this is going to be more fun than sitting on your couch watching Netflix for a couple of hours. Like, just go. It's okay. Especially sometimes you can find some good cheap flights as well. And then it's like minimal financial risk too. Just go for it. My favorite thing to do is go to Google Flights and you can put in the place where you live, like Dallas or Portland or wherever, and you
Yeah.
can leave the destination field blank and just put in the time range. And you get Google Maps like a map of the world, but with little tiny price tags over every airport on the planet. And you can just scroll through it and see. Like you're living in Texas nowadays, there are some cheap
Yeah.
flights to Colombia from there. Just like, oh, you could do a weekend trip in Medellin if you wanted to. Head down to Belize, do some snorkeling, just
Cool.
try something new.
You are putting ideas in my mind. So if you guys don't see me in a couple of weeks, you know where I'll be. All right. Either that where we'll do the show from Belize or I will have drowned snorkeling. So we'll see. Richard, I have looked at your photography for different places that you've been. We've got Richard is hiking on Instagram, and I guarantee if people go there, they look and they go like, "Who is this guy, and how do I hook up with him?" So you live the life that everyone goes like, "Oh, I wish I could travel. I wish I could do this," and you're doing it. So if people hit you up on there, I guess you can answer some of their questions. And I always have more questions for you. So we are definitely going to stay in touch. Thank you so much, and I will catch you next time on the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It was an
All right.
absolute pleasure.
Bye.